Multifamily communities typically consist of homeowners associations, condominium associations, and apartment communities. And really what makes them different is that these buildings are occupied, and I think that there's a very unique feature about that. You have a lot of construction being done, and it's new construction, and there's a big difference between working in a building that's unoccupied and one that is occupied, and you have to deal with residents, and you have to consider that people are going to be living in the community as you're working there, and it presents some unique challenges. From my perspective, the challenges are that you have to look at the schedule and sequencing the work and making sure that you're minimizing the impact on these residents as much as possible. Another aspect of it is that dust and disturbance of debris during the work is something that you want to consider. You want to limit that impact as much as possible. So there's different requirements that have to get put on the contractors to make sure that you're not spreading dust and debris that might potentially cause an issue for somebody in terms of breathing, respiratory issues, that you want to consider as part of these projects. In addition, the way that these communities and these projects are funded is a little bit different. It's not a new construction project where you have a single entity, if you will, like a contractor who's got a budget and they're going to work around that specific project constraint. You have a community here where individuals are funding towards this project, and it's going to impact a greater number of people if there's an overrun or a change order or something that might come up during a project. So that's one of the challenges that we see. We want to, from our perspective and working with these types of communities, we want to minimize that as much as possible. The key to a successful project is the planning. And really that comes down to, at the very beginning, the capital reserve study and the funding for that. So what we look at and we recommend is that even before you are thinking about doing any type of project, you want to make sure that your funding is there. That will eliminate any concerns or issues for having an assessment down the road that would be an unforeseen expense for the membership. Having a healthy reserve fund will mean that when a project comes up and when it's due for replacement, when you have to replace your siding, roofing, etc., you'll have the funding there, and it's going to make it a lot easier to begin that process. From the initial phases of starting a project, you really want to make sure that you do some investigation work. Let's say if you're doing a roof replacement, it's in your best interest to get into the roofs, take a look at the attic assemblies, get up on the roof, see if there's going to be unique challenges that are going to come up during that project. You don't want to just take what would normally be a boilerplate standard specification for roof replacement and just use that as your basis for your project, because you may have other issues that come up. If there's a problem with the ventilation, that could be a major hurdle to come over. Ventilation is very important. It impacts the potential warranty from the roofing manufacturers. It's a code requirement that you want to make sure that you're meeting. It can cause issues with condensation, and you can get microbial growth. So you really want to get into those attic spaces and look at that and identify if there's going to be a problem before you start tearing the roofs off, throwing new shingles on, because if you're going to have to fix those issues down the road, you're going to be redoing a lot of that work. Yeah, so the planning is just that. It's making sure that, number one, the funding is there with a healthy capital reserve plan in place. Getting out, doing an initial investigation, and identifying any potential issues that could come up. You really want to limit that before the project starts, because then you have to deal with what everyone fears the most, which is change orders. You want to eliminate that as much as possible. And then in doing that, you can really establish a realistic project budget so that you can consider if we see that we do have some of these issues, we know that we're going to have to be replacing a lot of extra sheathing or things like that. Maybe you want to plan the project that's going to be phased over a few years and really set up a realistic schedule for the project. And also included in that goes into then the specifications, preparing a detailed set of specifications for the contractor that accounts for these things, so that maybe you have established pricing for that work if it pops up, so that you don't have to go back and then try to negotiate with a contractor that's already been awarded the job. you want to eliminate as many unknowns as possible, because that's going to give you as close to a guaranteed cost for your project as you can, and eliminate any overruns and change orders. And I think that's extremely important for communities, again, that are funding these projects. You want to make sure that there really aren't overages and assessments and things that are going to come out of their pocket. I think as an engineer and somebody that lives in my own home, that's something that's very important to me. I don't want any unknowns coming up during my projects, and that's basically what we would recommend to anyone else engaging in a project as well.